Jesi milostivi čovekoljubiv Bog i tebi slavu uznosimo, Otcu i Sinu i Svetome Duhu, sada i u vekove vekova.
In a world of shadows and secrets untold, where primeval stories make the brave go cold, mighty gods on high and realms below, whispers of legends that shape each soul. And nightmarish dreams, cryptids lurking, nothing's as it seems. Giants walking, angels and demons fight. Only truth can bring the light. Through the echoes of time, the tales unfold. Mysteries arise as the prophecies are foretold. From valiant knights to buried treasure, this podcast brings nothing but pleasure. Yeah. Welcome to myth, mysteries and majesty. Study with us, don't be a travesty. Theology, mythology, fantasy and horror. Dungeons and dragons, Skyrim and Mordor. And Mordor, powers haunt the evening. In gothic castles where they're screaming. Wizards cast spells in their towers tonight, exploiting enigmas hidden from our sight. Archaeologists make excavations deep of the ancient tombs where pharaohs sleep. In the dust of ages we chronicles keep, storytelling's power of monsters that creep. Myths, mysteries and majesty is the place for you to learn about this haunted space. From scholarship to manuscripts of old, unlock the secrets of wisdom and gold.
Blessed Friday, everyone. I don't know how it's in your state and in your town, but in Chicago, it's getting snowier and snowier. Happy Valentine's Day. I don't know how was your Valentine's Day, but I ate 16 ounces of cheesecake by myself today. So if we have to quit the episode a little bit early, it's because of my stomach. I'm kidding and not kidding in the same time. Anyway, we'll be dealing with this Skinwalker Ranch episode that's been on mind on so many people who like paranormal, like supernatural, like all this crazy and weird stuff like we do. So we're hoping to not subjectively but objectively assess the material we've been compiling over this last 10 days or so when it comes to this topic, so we can hopefully present it with all the material and the data that we piled up over time. That being said, Ben, in your research so far and in your experience with as a pastor with supernatural stuff and as someone who came from the New Age background, what is it about this whole topic and fascination with the Skinwalker Ranch that is so interesting to us and even important as Christians?
All right, that's a lot. I would say I've been fascinated, with the Skinwalker Ranch for probably 10 years since I first heard about it. Watched a lot of the stuff on YouTube about it. I've seen some of the quote unquote documentaries that they have with it. I actually live, I mentioned it before, I live like, I think 8 or 9 hours away in Idaho, and I would love to drive down there, but I don't think it's just open to visitors. I think they kind of frown on that. But I would love to go and just walk through and like see the place and see what it actually, feels like and kind of have boots on the ground. But yeah, coming from a background in witchcraft and New Age, originally Skinwalker Ranch started out much more paranormal. In the 90s, it, took a hard turn towards, alien craft and cattle mutilations and that kind of stuff. So it almost kind of trends with the culture is what it feels like. because in the 90s, and X-Files and everything is really when aliens became super popular in the media, and crop circles, got really big and all that kind of stuff. And so the people that own the ranch started experiencing that, but then they did something that hadn't been done previously, really. They started sharing what was happening with news outlets. And so that's when it became popular and people started really learning about it. So yeah, I think culturally, that stuff is interesting to see how, we as Americans are really in the world, especially now that we're coming at this 2025 after all of the, UAP disclosures from the Pentagon over the last 5 years and all this kind of stuff. Look at it and say, oh yeah, maybe there really is something going on out there. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I want to go out there personally because I've heard different things will happen to somebody, a Christian, if they're out there, and that they can rebuke it in the name of Jesus and it'll go away. And to be honest, I just want to try it and see, because I've also heard the opposite, where, like there's a big story about some yogi master guy who went out there and tried to channel the aliens with his yoga chakra stuff and ended up ticking him off really bad, and he got attacked and ran out of the place. So yeah, I would love to just see for myself.
Cool. Sean, when it comes to your experience and your research, what is it about this topic, and also you coming from New Age and being a Christian now, that draw you to the topic even before we start talking about it?
Yeah, for me, it's probably that Skinwalker Ranch is by far the most scientifically investigated paranormal phenomena ever. I think that it's had more exposure. It's had a lot of criticism, but also there's been a lot of experience there. It's been enough to base multiple projects on, between movies, books. Now they have TV shows exploring it. You have something like $22 million worth of funds dumped into investigating the Skinwalker Ranch. So I really think that if there is any place where we can kind of say this is approximates the supernatural phenomena that we should expect to see, it would be Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, if there's any place that is more veritable supernatural activity, I don't know of it. So I think that this is really the place where our modern scientific method and our ancient storytelling supernatural kind of holding skepticism at arm's length, they kind of coalesce together in order to form the best story of our day.
Yeah, so far in my research, which hasn't lasted for years, like with both of you, I think for tonight I'll be more on the side of like a neutral / skeptical person, but I want to believe, like Fox Mulder, right? I want to believe. So I hope you guys will bring some balance to my skepticism and bring some details that will make me think hard about this and make me excited. So we'll start by dissecting this 2013 Skinwalker Ranch documentary, which is not truly a documentary. When I watched it, it reminded me almost of something like the Blair Witch Project. It was recorded intentionally, almost like with a phone camera or some, I don't know, poor quality camera with all these, you can see the noise effects like on the videos. Of course, they're heavily edited, intentionally done that way to, I guess, almost look like a big production horror movie. But it's a fictional horror film loosely based on the real Skinwalker Ranch, meaning the events depicted in this documentary, or the so-called documentary, are considered to be somewhat fictional and not entirely based on true events, which is normal because when you watch any movie and the author can make a movie, let's say with we all love Lord of the Rings. the author of every movie has certain freedom to input and change things according to his or her will. That's normal. So as the producers of this documentary were making the movie, of course they added so many different things that was according to their taste. So we will not be criticizing that, but at least from my point of view, when I watch it as a neutral person who did not experience that, I'm like, well, how much is true, how much you guys added. So that being said, we'll start dissecting this, the theme and the material of this documentary. So in 2010, Skinwalker Ranch gained media attention after experiencing a wide range of unexplained phenomena, including the disappearance of the rancher's 8-year-old son. Modern Defense Enterprises, or MDE, sent a team of experts to document and study the occurrences. MD's footage was found in the possession of journalist Jacob Randles, who obtained it through an undisclosed source. Randles disappeared inexplicably on January 18, 2013. And when I was looking today and the other days on a couple of different forums, people say that to his day, his body is not found. Some people assume he's dead. Some people think, well, there's not even firm evidence that this person ever existed. And again, I don't know what is true. So maybe we'll stop here as the first pit stop, where I would like to ask you guys for your opinion. Have you ever heard about this journalist? Have you ever heard about his involvement in the whole process? Was he even a real person? Is he still alive? Do you guys have your educated guesses? So we can always start with Ben because he's above.
That's right. We'll go clockwise. So there have been so many different people who have investigated and gone out, and talked to whoever owned the ranch at the time, that I kind of even get the stories mixed up in my head. I have to sit down and look at them over and over again, to try and keep what's what straight. But this specific, journalist in this, I don't know about him necessarily, but the things that he recorded and that he purported to say on these findings and whatever do line up with pretty much all the other stories that you hear. So I think that even if he is something that was just kind of created for the sake of the show, then it's still in line with what other people have encountered and what they've been experiencing.
Yeah. So I'm gonna really agree with Ben there. There's so much that's going on at so many different times. I mean, you actually, when you're looking at Skinwalker Ranch, you basically have to divide it up into eras of when the activity is happening, right? You had the Myers era, you had the Sherman era, and then you had the Bigelow era, and now Adamantium owns it. And so it's like, in order to be able to understand what's happening where, you have to understand whose hands it was in and where the money's at, right? Because when Myers had it, you didn't really have any stories coming out of it. But when they sold it to Sherman, there were certain things that they told them, you can't do this here, right? So this was kind of like a hush hush, keep it down low. They sell it, and then these guys are occupying the space. Once they sold it to the billionaire Bigelow, he had every reason in the world to blow this thing out of the water. So depending on when that changed hands, the documentary, which was really a found footage kind of thing. I mean, it was like a Blair Witch thing. But they had every reason in the world to make it as big as possible. So I don't know if that was based on a true story or if it was a completely fictitious account. But the things that were happening in the way that they told the story was 100% in line with the things that had been reported and were later reported on the property. So I don't actually have a firm conviction either way on whether the person was real or not, or whether or not these things actually happened. And I could see, depending on the era that it's in, you said it was made in like 2013. And I'm not sure if that's after Sherman sold it or not. But there could be motivation to try to create something in the popular space to try to draw attention to what was happening there. And it may even been I'm sorry, it may even have been good motivation. Let's publicize what's happening here. We're going to create a fictitious account that's going to capture the minds of the public so people will know that there's something really going on here. Regardless of if that was the intention or not, that is what happened. All eyes turned towards Skinwalker Ranch. And so now we're telling the story.
Okay, thank you for that. So the so-called documentary starts on November 11th, 2010, when a father, Hoyt Miller, and a son, Cody, are playing on the open fields just outside the gate of their ranch while the wife is recording the video. Suddenly, in an instant, there is a huge bright light far behind the boy, and when it flashes, the boy disappears before the parents. The team of MDE investigators came to the ranch on August 1st, 2011, when their team came to Hoyt's farm to install the security equipment and cameras. Hoyt seemed to be alone on the farm with his animals, while his wife was getting medical professional help for her trauma outside the farm. So that's the very beginning of the documentary. The locals are confused about what happened, and some are skeptical regarding the supernatural explanation. And of course, if you guys saw the video, few of them are like, we think there is something weird, but most of them were like, yeah, I've been here my whole life. I didn't see anything weird. I didn't notice anything. That's weird, but nothing supernatural. Where like we don't know what's happening in that context. Like it's weird. Like could it be like Sean said, hush hush, could it be some conspiracy that is not with UFOs and Bigfoot, but just like something like a more humane, sinister motive or background. So the locals seem to be divided, but more inclined on the less supernatural aspect, at least in this documentary. Already on the following evening, August 2nd, when the team is getting all ready to go to bed, a lady, her name is Lisa, she's the veterinarian, and one of the crew members talk about whatever they were talking about. You can vaguely see a figure behind the windows outside walking by. After they all went to sleep, there was a sudden, very loud sound coming from the outside, and people inside the house were screaming and holding their ears. Whoever watched, they knew they couldn't hold that high pitch, that high sound that was coming from the outside. They all gathered on the first floor while hearing the footsteps coming from above. And this reminded me of so many horror movies. The electricity seemed to disappear for a second. The team went on the roof to investigate, only to see dozens of dead bats on the roof. It seems that their sonar was messed up and they fell dead. We'll stop here because this was a lengthy paragraph. Okay, so first there's a figure behind the window. Then there's a big flash and this high pitched sound. They see bats on the roof. They're all dead. And when Lisa, the veterinarian, is investigating them, she said, they're not ill or sick as she is suspected. As it's almost as if something or someone was able to mess up their sonars, and they got stunned and fell down and died. So it's like we see a few bizarre events happening within few hours in the same night. Ben, what's your thought on this?
So yeah, the movie, the Lisa gal, she's actually an actress named Erin Cahill. She was on Power Rangers Time Force. But yeah, she it's interesting because they take the phenomenon right around alien abduction, and they start to kind of introduce it, right? The figure in the background, it's almost kind of foreshadowing, the sound that, people, you can't handle it. The massive, I don't know, what do you call a group of bats? It's not a flock, I wouldn't think, whatever, dead. That, really harkens back to, like when you see, a big kill, where like a whole flock of crows or something that was flying just drops dead. Or, you'll be watching like a murmuration of starlings, and all of a sudden, for some reason, they all just start smashing into, like a wall and fall dead. It is very scary, but it is based on things that have really happened that you absolutely can prove. And so, yeah, like you said, horror movie, sci-fi, whatever, the way they kind of, frame it and shoot it, it's meant to bring the eerie, the creepy crawlies up in you as you watch it. And so I enjoy that. I think that's a lot of fun.
Can we just take a minute to appreciate that Pastor Ben knew that a group of starlings was called a murmuration? So, what, like I said before with the movie, these are phenomena that were actually happening in the place. Whether or not as they were depicted in the movie is true to life. Animals react very weird in Skinwalker Ranch, and they react to the phenomena. Also, flying animals and their sonar getting messed up is later in the Skinwalker Ranch TV show that is done on the History Channel, which when they were brought out there, part of the contract that they had to sign was that nothing would be made up. The only thing that would be reported was what actually happened, which is very odd for the History Channel because this is produced by the same people who produce Ancient Aliens. Right. And so in order to have access to Skinwalker Ranch, they had to promise that nothing was going to be fabricated, that things were just going to be depicted as they were, and they had to have scientists on the grounds. And so, we know Colm Kelleher, who wrote the book, he was a biologist, and then Dr. Travis Taylor is he's an astrophysicist. So we know that animals react strangely. We know that there are aerial phenomena that are going on in this place. In fact, in the TV show, there was a moment where they were trying to understand what was happening with an artifact that was about 5,000 feet above ground level, and they took an altimeter up there, and between the 3,000 and 5,000 foot area, it said that they were 40 feet off the ground. So this is something that would mess with the calibration of these animals. There are testimonies of not only animals behaving strangely, but animals being almost like ritualistically killed on the property. So the idea that whether it was true or not of the bats, this I could see as being tangentially related to phenomena that does occur on the property. And so because of that, like I said, I'm not going to comment on whether or not the bat thing actually happened, but it is very much like things that do happen on the property.
Yeah, thanks for that. By the way, I just want to say that when I was watching that part when they suddenly start, hearing and seeing the footsteps coming from the ceiling, I don't know if you guys watched, there is a relatively new sci-fi horror movie called No One Is Coming to Save You. And it came out 2 years ago, right, Ben? I see you're excited. Man, that movie was freaky. So when that girl is left alone in her house and she hears those footsteps and an alien shows up in front of her bed and she has to go beneath, that's what I was thinking when I saw in the documentary, when I saw those footsteps. I mean, yeah, it is heavily edited, of course, added special effects, but it just made me instantly go to that movie. I was like, man, it's like, it was done pretty decently, this so-called documentary. It's almost like a B production horror movie. And like Ben said, oh, this actress is kind of semi-famous because she was in the Power Rangers. So kudos to them. It's just that within that time frame, again, it's not like all the sources that they were like giving later that can be verifiable. But thankfully, to stories that Sean was cross-referencing. Well, even outside this documentary, there are many stories that were, just going around in that area and probably even online where people are reporting similar stories, and they're not even related on this ranch. So it seems that that area in Utah seemed to be a bizarre one. So Ben, once when you plan, traveling there, invite Sean and me, because we don't want to miss an opportunity being mauled by a Bigfoot. That's like, imagine that story. The podcast will get millions of subscribers. I won't be able to witness that, but future kids will. So please don't forget us. So that very same night, a Native American shaman came to bless the land to communicate with the energy coming out of it. And these were the shaman actor's words in the documentary. But he warned them that this land was forsaken by his people because of the legends of tribes disappearing from the land. So he recommended them to leave as soon as possible. And as I was checking online, it is actually true that Navajo tribe people don't even want to step anywhere close to the Skinwalker Ranch. They consider that land to be cursed, haunted, call it whatever you want. So there's some truth behind that, right? So then in the documentary, Shaman reaches to his ancestors in the prayer and chanting. Suddenly he falls down and tells them he can't do anything for them. He starts getting all this upset and loud, and he leaves because as he told them, there's nothing I can do for you, just run home. And of course they don't listen. My question for this paragraph is, Sean, we covered at least once, maybe even more in our creepy story segments, that certain tribes and certain people who are into shamanism and into the occult, they have the ability to somehow transport or transfer their spirit into an animal or into another being. And in this way, people are saying, well, many shamans would learn how to, imitate or be in another person's body to be like a skinwalker. So my question for both of you would be like, well, if that's true, so hypothetically, let's say that's true, we cannot blame any local shaman from Navajo tribe because, as we learned, they're scared of this territory and they would try to back off. So my question is, well, let's say it's not extraterrestrial source. Let's say it's a human spirit that is doing witchcraft. What would be the next hypothesis? Would it be that maybe someone from another tribe, maybe like a rival tribe is trying to mess up, or maybe puts curse or scare people so they would leave, and then that area would maybe be without white inhabitants, Caucasian inhabitants, because they dare to come to their sacred land? I'm just trying to think out loud as I'm talking. What makes sense according to you, Ben?
So yeah, I mean, if you go back to the origin of the name Skinwalker, you're right. It comes from the Navajo legend, and in it, it's like a medicine man would have to end up practicing such dark magic. It's even rumored that they would have to cannibalize, right? And eat another human being to get to the point where their soul could become so absolutely corrupt that they could become a skinwalker. And then that individual typically would be outcast from the tribe. Like they don't want that, bringing that bad juju into their tribe. And so these are bad, right? These are very, 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 very bad. And one of the original stories, whenever it was, still in the Shermans, it was the story of how, they saw a big black dog, more like a wolf, but it had red glowing eyes. And, they would shoot it and the bullets wouldn't phase it. Like shoot it with a rifle, like a hunting rifle, and see it, make contact, right? But totally unfazed. And so that's where the idea was that, wow, that's a skinwalker, right? It's too big to be a natural animal. It doesn't behave like that. And there have been other animals that have been seen other than just, like the giant wolf thing, but with the red eyes and, the black, kind of animals out there. And so that's kind of where it got its name, was from witnessing the animal and then associating it with the legend of the skinwalker from the native tribes that are around there, which are the Navajo. That whole area, I don't even know how to properly pronounce it. Yinta Basin, whatever it is. I don't know. Like, I've drank the beer. I still don't know how to pronounce the name, but it's like, that whole area, when you get looking at it, like somebody, commented in the chat, that there's another ranch that's not too far from there. The whole area, if you go back through the Navajo lore of the place, and even during like the gold rush and stuff, is full of paranormal activity. There's, that whole area of mountains, and plateaus and stuff is supposedly full of secret mines and tunnels, and, people get lost, and there's spirits, and there's, just tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff has been going on in that area for several hundred years. But yes, when you go and you talk to the local Navajo who are willing to talk about it, because that's taboo, right? Like even to talk about a skinwalker or to talk about the evil that lurks in an area can bring that bad energy back on you. So a lot of people in tribes won't even talk about it. But when you can get somebody on film or on audio to talk about it, they'll tell you, you know, like, oh yeah, see that rise over there? We don't go past that. We won't walk past that into that land because of the evil that's there. And so that's absolutely, you know, on documentary, has been recorded, you know, from some of the, you know, the tribal members that still live over in that area. And it's been that way forever. Like they just know that when you go over there, bad things are going to happen. We don't go over there. And they're living in an area that's saturated, you know, with paranormal activity. But even amongst all of that, you don't go over there. So that, I think that really is kind of telling, that of all of the, you know, interesting and you know, head scratching things that could take place, that is the one place where it's like, that's not curious, that's not exciting. The Navajo say that's evil. We stay away.
Yeah, one thing to probably understand about the desperate situation that the Navajo were in when the Skinwalkers came to be was had been in warring relations with the Utes, which is who Utah is named for. And the Mormons come in, and Brigham Young is trying to get Utah recognized as a state so that they can get money and establish their church out here in Salt Lake City. And so in establishing the state, the federal government has to come in and occupy the territory. And so they come in, the Navajo and the Utes, warring tribes, the Utes side with the federal government. And so they work with the white people to kick the Navajo off the land, knowing they're going to be kicked out too. But it was just this malice, this hatred for the Navajo people. And so the Navajo witch doctors, they released the evil that is the Skinwalker. And Ben's completely right. The rituals involve like cannibalism, but it's not just any cannibalism. It's kind of you kill and eat the thing that you most love. This is it's total darkness and depravity. You have to embrace the evil in order to be able to walk on in that path. And so, you know, you imagine Mormons in the area. Mormons, no bueno for Christians. Then you have this wickedness, this evil here, and it doesn't just go away. The land remembers, right? There's something wicked happened here. And the Navajo people, much smarter, much more intuitive than the white people, they look at the mesa and they say, that's Skinwalker Ridge. We don't go there. That's the path of the Skinwalker. And that whole Uinta Basin with Blind Frog Ranch, like what my mom said, Skinwalker Ranch, and there's a few other ranches around there, a few other plots of land that are just inundated with paranormal activity. When Bigelow bought the ranch, he came to look at the property after purchasing it, and he noticed that all along the fence line, the Native Americans on their side of the fence had hung animal bladders, which was a form of protection to keep the evil that was on the ranch in the ranch instead of spreading to their property. So they recognize it. They recognize the evil that's there. They understand why the Navajo did this, and it cursed the land. The land is now, as Lewis would say, bent. This place is broken. It's corrupted, and if you think about it, this area has never seen the light of the gospel of Christ. This is a place that's still very far outside of God's territory. So this is the place where the gods reign, right? Because there's not an established Christian gospel preaching presence there. So this is, I mean, it's like Mirkwood, right? Nobody wants to go there. And the only people who are going there are crazy. So no wonder there's all this evidence, or not evidence, but all of this experiential account of paranormal activity, and yet they can't can't capture any of this on camera. Not because, oh, it just doesn't show up on camera, but because you have technology dying, you have cameras dying, you have batteries getting drained, you have GPS satellites that won't connect to something that connects literally anywhere else. It's to say that there's not something, just looking at the technological difficulties that are happening in the ranch, you would have to say that it's sitting on like some sort of nuclear power thing that's just messing with all of the magnets, all of the compasses, all of the electronics. I mean, you can't just say there's nothing going on. We have enough evidence from the consistent malfunctions of things to know something's happening there. All the paranormal stuff aside, the equipment malfunctions alone constitute something paranormal happening there.
That reminds me of the Bermuda Triangle, problems that, all the helicopters, planes, and ships are, well, I don't know nowadays, but in the past, that was what the whole area was known by. Like, all the equipment will just shut down, and, you would lose all these, aircrafts and all these, boats and ships. So that as you were talking, I was just thinking about the Bermuda Triangle. I'm like, the only difference is the Bermuda Triangle has water and this is land, but everything else seems to be very similar to the teeth. So it's like, it's in a way it's fascinating, but on the other side, it's a little bit scary. I also want to say, Ben, when you were talking how the Navajo have this moral code, like for everyone, but especially for their shamans. So like if you dabble too much into witchcraft and if you start acting like a skinwalker, want to go outside our territory and maybe hurt others by acting like one, you'll be expelled. While the rival tribe did not have those moral codes. I'm just fascinated by just that difference alone. Like how much, I don't know, I can't judge based on anything else, but just on this difference, I can say like this is also what we can see, I think, and cross-reference with Romans 1. If we don't harden our hearts, we can allow God through nature and natural laws to reveal to us the moral code. Maybe not the whole gospel, but at least the moral code of loving people and treating them as equal to us. But once when our hearts get hardened, when we're blinded by hatred, vengeance, aggression, whatever, then if you're acting like Viking berserkers, there's no love for your neighbor. If he hurt someone from you, you will go and hurt 5 of them just to show them, because it's not anymore, tooth for tooth or an arm for arm. Now it's like, I'm gonna do vengeance. So I just like what you said about their code. That would be, at least back in the days, like, no, you're not dabbling into that type of witchcraft. You're not going to, practice this skinwalker thing. You're not going to use it to go and, do something to others. So I just have to say I like that. I have a very, very short paragraph, and that is, when it comes to the following night, the team security system recorded something huge outside the property, so the team had to leave the house to go to investigate. They found a cat lying on the ground. It was a typical case of cattle mutilation. No blood. It was almost surgically done. Again, Sean, we covered few stories of these, like, not when it comes to the Skinwalker Ranch, but in general throughout the country, of people witnessing these things. And I don't know why, but cow mutilation is almost always connected with strange lights, strange aircrafts, Bigfoot, and things of that sort. I don't know why, but this reminds me of some of the stories we covered before. Okay, Ben, so when it comes to this perfect cattle mutilation, in a way that is perfectly done, no blood traces, like you just see a carcass, a recent carcass, it still did not start decomposing, yet there's no blood left in it. Like, how is that even possible? There's no traces of blood around it. It's not the animal, it's not human person. What is the source of something like this?
So, I mean, yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? When you look at it and the wounds are cauterized as they're cut, when there is no blood at the scene, so you have to assume that it was, butchered somewhere else and then dropped here. I've heard explanations, everything from supernatural to alien to the government, and there's good, hypotheses, right, supporting any of these. But I don't know. I know that when I, grew up and spent a lot of time on my grandparents' farm, they raised cattle. We never had any cattle mutilations, where we were in Texas. But I remember driving, outside of town in certain places, and the ditches would be lined, at certain times on the sides of the road with dead dogs. That would be very similar. The cuts would be clean, they weren't mauled, scavengers wouldn't come over and eat on them. And yeah, and there's just no blood. And of course, at the time, being in Texas, we blamed it on whatever ethnicity happened to be moving in at the time, and saying, oh yeah, they stole this from some neighbor, and killed it and ate it, kind of thing. But it didn't change the fact that if you were to pull over and get out and look, like, there's no blood. These are very straight cuts on these animals. Organs are missing, and the fact that, turkey vultures will eat anything, they wouldn't come near it. The coyotes wouldn't come near it. And it wasn't just like one or two, in the same area. You could drive, a couple miles of this certain stretch of road, and there was multiple carcasses all up and down the road. So I don't know. Having just read The Facade, Heiser makes some pretty, neat. He posits some really neat stuff about, it not being alien at all, and it being more government, kind of ran stuff. I don't know. I'm up in the air with it. But it's neat, and I would love to find out the answer.
My take is a little unhinged, and that's all right. So we occupy a space in time that is very distinct from everyone who lived before us. Every nation, every culture that came before us, pre-Christian, had to offer sacrifices to the gods of the land. This was required. In our scriptures, offer sacrifices, and what goes on the altar is the long lobe of the liver, the kidneys, and the blood is poured out on the ground, right? So every culture, every human society before the days of Christianity offered sacrifices to the gods of the land. These are still in a pre-Christian state. And if you don't pay the toll, the gods will exact the sacrifice. I think that's what's happening. You have organs missing. You have blood being completely drained. We know through the scriptures that the blood was poured out on the ground, but we also know that blood sacrifices were being offered to other gods, and that's what got the Jews in trouble. We know in Enoch that the giants required blood sacrifices. What I'm thinking is these are precision cuts that say that they're made like with a scalpel, but I think it was in Colm's book where he was talking about this, where he was, of course, like I said, he's a biologist. He was referencing a cow that had died, had been killed, drained of all of its blood, and it was someone had eyes on that animal living and upright 5 minutes before. So they get the veterinarian over to determine the cause of death. The veterinarian comes over with tools that are used specifically to perform an autopsy on an animal, cuts it open, uses these big like loppers to cut open the ribs, break that out, has a saw hacking. Hours go by as this person is just trying to get into this chest cavity to determine what happened to the animal. The animal was upright and living 5 minutes before, and then dead and drained of all of its blood in 5 minutes. Scalpel-like cuts. And the medical doctor who is performing an autopsy is hacking away at this animal, making very imprecise cuts in order to try to break into this cavity. This is not something that can be done. I mean, it's just not. You have a trained professional who went to school for years in order to be able to determine the cause of death of this animal. Wants to make as little um, debris inside the cavity as possible, so that way they don't basically ruin the crime scene, to be able to investigate what happened. And they're being not because of negligence. It's just very imprecise when you look at it. This is a messy job, and yet we have exact laser-like precision on these animals. That this is not something that humans can do. It's just not, because we have the human who's trained to do it there not doing it. So it's not something that you can do in the time frame. It's not something that you can do with the equipment. What do they have? Vacuum hoses hooked up that's sucking out all the blood? And even then, even if you would, the only way that we can produce kosher killed meat today is you have to hang the animal upside down and bleed it out while it's alive, because the heart has to continue beating. If the heart stops, you can't access blood in the animal. Even if you're using vacuum tubing, you have valves in the heart that prevent certain veins from being able to get blood out. So yeah, I am not one who thinks that this is something that some teenagers are out doing. I think that this is something that is spiritual, because I don't think that aliens are a thing. I think that they're demons. So yeah, I think that this is what humans have always known, that there is a spiritual reality, and that geography is cosmic warfare. And I think that this is what's happening in these places, that the sacrifices that have always been made have always been expected to be made. People relied on their livestock. It's not like they're just going to be like, oh yeah, go kill that one and throw it in a ditch. There was a reason that they were performing these sacrifices, because if I don't offer a sacrifice, whatever it is will take two. It's like with the story of Grendel. We give it a sacrifice so it leaves us alone, because if not, it'll come and it'll devastate the herd. That's exactly what you see happening there.
So I want to expand a little bit on that theory, Sean. I like the theory, and that's pretty much what we see through the Bible, ancient Near East, the mythologies and religions. We see this through history. We see this with Aztecs and Mayas who lived in the Americas, right? We see all this blood sacrifice. But I just want to expand a little bit on that theory. Whoever performed this, I would doubt aliens or demons, whatever you want to say, because let's say humans are out of the question. It will either have to be because of their diet, or it will have to be because of their worship, or maybe both. Sometimes we say either or, but sometimes that's a false dichotomy. Because at least we know in the Old Testament, the Jews, once when they sacrificed the bulls, they would eat the rest. Once they would sacrifice the inside, they would eat the rest, right? It was not forbidden. So I'm thinking that as you were talking, I was thinking about this is some sort of yes, I would relate it with the cryptids and giants from Enoch, and maybe even the Book of Giants. But it's almost like a sort of vampirism that is not like in movies, but is a different type of vampirism where only certain parts will be gone and the whole blood, because life is in the blood. What they will do with blood, we can only assume. Again, if it's for feeding, for feeding. If it's for sacrifice, then sacrifice. To whom? We don't know. Ultimately, we believe that we know the source of that, but who will be just above them in their structure, we don't know that, because we don't even know who they are exactly. So while you were talking, I was just thinking about the cases of cannibalism, again with the giants, and also sorts of vampirism. Like if there's a spirit of a vampire, not literally a person with long teeth that turns into a bat and these things like in movies, but if there's this spirit of vampirism that hates people and is killing them by sucking the blood out because of the life that is in the blood, and because blood is so sacred to God, and when you draw the blood of the person stops being human, right? Because you die and you're devoid of life. I'm just thinking, like, could this be for some type of, like I said, either diet or type of worship that would require certain organs? Because why are the limbs there? Why, I mean, the arms and legs? Why are the Why is the tongue always there? Why are the eyes over there? Why is always the same like inside parts, which we see in New Age and in witchcraft? They're always the inside parts, and the shamans will be like they want to see how the harvest will be or the winter coming. They'll be taking certain portions like liver, kidneys, whatever from animals or from birds. They would like whatever they would do, open their stomachs, and they will like try to see to predict the future. So if similar organs are missing from the cattle with all the blood, then I'm thinking, well, it could be because of the occult, but it could be also because of the feeding. Feeding who and what, I don't know. Worshiping who and what, again, I don't know. It's just a theory. I don't know. It just makes sense. And before I switch to the next segment, I don't know if one of you two or both of you would like to add on anything what I said, if you have any other idea or thoughts. Okay, Ben.
Yeah. No, when you were talking about that, it just reminded me that, at the time, the cattle mutilations became, really popular and headlining all across the world, because England was having them, like everywhere was having them. And as far as I know, they still happen. It just doesn't get the same reaction as it used to. It was around that exact same time that on the border of Texas and Mexico, the chupacabra started being talked about, because it was thought that that was what was causing the mutilations at the time. They attributed it to a new cryptid, and they call it the goat sucker, because a lot of the mutilations down there were happening to goats. On the Texas side, it was happening to cattle down on the border, but that's what they attributed it to. And they thought that it was a vampiric cryptid type being that had razor sharp teeth and claws and was sucking, draining the blood out of the animals, eating the organs it liked for whatever purpose, and then leaving all the rest. Like if a human's going to cut something up, especially a cow, we're going to take the steak, right? We're going to take the good stuff, but that stuff gets left behind. The organs that are missing, are things that might be used for like divination, or you could use, as part of like a potion or something, but are not typically what you think of when you think of food, at least from human terms. Is it something that you would want to sacrifice to whatever, regional god? Possibly. A regional god can demand whatever sacrifice they want to. And so I actually really like that idea, that it has, quite a bit to do with that. But yeah, it still doesn't answer okay, humans can't perform it. What's performing it? Is it just that they're a regional god of the area, and therefore all that is under that area is theirs, and so they can take what they want? Is it picked out by a certain person, that says, okay, whatever god I'm worshiping, here it is, have at it, and then the spiritual being is able to take on flesh and devour it, and then return to spirit? I don't know, but it's neat to think about for sure.
And then I have three things to add to that. The first is I think it's in Deuteronomy 32, where you have the people in Deuteronomy that are being told that you were worshiping those goat-headed Shadim, which you have not, gods that you had not known. And of course, Dr. Heiser says that Shadim, rightly translated, doesn't actually mean like demon. It's more like a territorial god. That's kind of what we see happening there, right? So you have actually a scriptural account of this this phenomenon that I'm proposing it might be, where it's an ancient god that is getting their fix of blood. Secondly, even in the scripture, when you have a sacrifice that is properly offered, the blood is poured out on the side of the altar and is drank by the ground. So even in scripture, the earth is getting the blood. So the land gets the blood, even in scripture. I think there's probably something profound in that I'm not thinking of. And third, in most indigenous cultures, you see very explicit, graphic sexual exaggeration of the deities. You have phallic images and things like that. Interestingly, and I haven't heard this about animal mutilation in other sites. Maybe it's just not necessarily reported, but specifically in Skinwalker Ranch, the mutilation is taking the reproductive organs of the animals. So you have reproductive organs being taken from these animals, which are not good for food, but for fertility and that kind of thing in some sort of spiritual sense, that could be. And so I guess I really don't have conclusions on those thoughts. I just wanted to add those to the conversations. I don't really know if they go anywhere.
I would say that, cow testicles are awfully yummy. I have worked cattle. I have, seen them cut fresh off the bull and had them, for dinner that night. That's some good eating.
Ben, in the Old Testament, you'll be a priest butcher for sure. That'll be your role. I'll be some like annoying, either like a teacher or wannabe teacher. You'll be a butcher. Sean will be a huntsman, something like that. So it's like we'll all play roles. But that was hilarious. I thank you for your honesty. Like, oh yeah, I ate it. It's good. Okay. So what I was thinking once when you guys mentioned the sexual parts of the animals missing, and I don't believe in this. I'm just being Fox Mulder in this second and saying, what if? Well, what if some other type of species out there is trying to experiment on us and on animals by dissecting our bodies, our organs, and trying to understand our biology and the way our bodies are functioning? The same way when we take a frog to the lab and cut it and try to, show to the high schoolers, you want to see how the inside of a frog looks like. I'm not saying I believe in that. I'm just trying to see, well, what can be some other hypothesis out there if they're like cutting more parts. The other hypothesis would be, okay, now that we're getting into sexual stuff, could it be that these beings are being perverted, and that these sexual organs they're cutting are serving them in their rituals, or maybe as a symbol of fertility, or maybe the way they serve their own deity is this wicked, perverted, sexually perverted, deity. Maybe like Ishtar was, seen to be a fertility goddess back in the days. So I'm just trying to see, based on the data we're gathering, what some other competitive hypothesis could be thrown out there that maybe don't make sense 100%, but even if it makes sense 10%, I still would like to hear about them. So again, I'm just thinking, could it be for the sake of, them experimenting on us to learn our biology, human and also cattle or animal biology, or could it be maybe for some sexual rite? Ben, do you want to say something on this? And then Sean can say, okay, thanks.
Okay, so I've spent the last 3 hours of my drive to and from work listening to Tim Alberino, and he's pretty out there, right? But his Birthright series that he's got, he goes into some depth, and I was listening to him talk about it, into and his take on it is everything's physical, right? Aliens are actual physical things. The elder race, which is what he calls, and angels, he believes are physical beings, that they're not non-corporeal, right? That they actually have physicality to them, and he believes very much that they are working and studying the earth and how the animals work, how the plants work, how humans work, in order to take it over, but not by taking the earth and assimilating it to them, like the gray aliens or whatever, but so they can assimilate to be able to live on earth and basically breed us out. And so that there's lots of hybrids being made and, DNA type war stuff. He gets in there and, he just, he preaches it, and he connects it all to the Bible, which is, just crazy, blows my mind to listen to him. And he's the first one to say I might be wrong, but here's what I think. And yeah, I definitely think he's wrong on some stuff, but it's an interesting concept. Like you said, if even 10% of it could possibly be correct, that it is a malevolent force that is in fact trying to research, the flora and the fauna of the earth, or humanity who's abdicated their role, as being able to rule and reign on earth. They abdicated their role to the powers and principalities of the air. Maybe if you want to get into like, Nephilim are coming back, maybe instead of the sons of God coming down, and just, mating with the daughters of Eve, now we've got all sorts of genetic hybridization. And, like, well, what was it Japan did? Made a pig that like 10% of it was human DNA or something recently. I just read a thing where Japan is now creating human muscle fibers. Didn't say what human they were using, but they're lab growing human muscle fibers, attaching it to 3D printed limbs. And then by running, specific electric stimuli through the muscles, they're making working 3D printed limbs and stuff that are half genetically human and half plastic. Like, scientists are just getting out there and they're doing this stuff. So what's not to say that it's not, the Rephaim, I guess, leading them down this path, right? That they're not in communication with some other entity, whether you want to say aliens are real or aliens are spiritual or, whatever, but that there's not a dark, sinister, thing that is leading and guiding us down this path. And some of these other countries, are just kind of like, ethics be damned. Let's just do it and see what happens. And these weird things are happening and are being created, and they're making these mutants and they're making these chimeras, like we used to hear about in Roman and Greek myth. They're actually genetically modifying and trying to clone and make these things in labs now, and they're starting to get more and more success. And I see that, and then in my brain I go to like, the Terminator and Skynet, and I think, okay, so you can 3D print, the skeletal structure, you can grow all the muscles, let's put an AI brain in it and see what happens, right? We've have so many movies warning us not to do this stuff, and yet that's exactly what we're doing. And who's to say Skinwalker Ranch is any different? The powers and principalities that are over that region could very well be leading the people that worship them to do and participate in this kind of thing. And they're taking it for experimentation, for hybridization, for whatever their ultimate end goal is. That's my take on Tim Alberino.
Yeah, you thought you were going to out unhinged me. Not today, boy. So, all right.
Wait. Are you saying you have better answer than the Bulls balls? Yes, I don't think.
So, okay. First of all, you will be upgraded. Resistance is futile. We are Raphaim. We will adapt. All right. So, thinking about the sex organs being removed, I'm going back to the conversation that we recently had with Dane, Nico, where we were talking about the lion men. And I referenced the book of Jubilees, where it said that the sons of the Nephilim sinned against all the creatures of the earth. All right, so there was already, according to the book of Jubilees, there was already genetic things going on there, and that's why God flooded the world. According to the Second Temple tradition, and the book of Jubilees was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so we know that it is at least as ancient as the New Testament. So I do think that there is something to that. Whether or not I would go all the way in Alberino's perspective, I think with Alberino, I think he's right more than he's wrong, but he has some things that I would question, like his idea that everything is all physical. I think that we would just that's just not the way the Bible talks about stuff, right? There is a spiritual world, and that's not the way that the Greeks posited things. It's not the way the Egyptians posited things. It's not the way the early church thought about things. I mean, it's not that they. Okay, collecting my thoughts. All right, so I don't disagree that they have bodies, but I just don't agree that their bodies have to be three-dimensional, corporeal bodies that are like bound in the exact same experience that ours are. So they could have a spiritual body in a different plane of existence and move into ours. If we could put that caveat there, I could agree with Alberino on that, because obviously we know that the sons of God, they knew that they had these biological urges, and they knew that they had the equipment to do something about it, right? They had those bull testicles. So, um, okay. And then thirdly, I think that if we were to posit like aliens or something else that we don't already have a category for, then we're violating the use of Occam's razor, which says that like it's got to be the simplest explanation. The simplest is right. If we can answer it based on the categories we already have, we don't have to, move everything over and create a new category in order to explain the phenomenon. Then it's probably best to do that. And I think that we have sufficient categories to be able to explain this phenomena. Whether or not it's anything supernatural, which I don't even think that's a question anymore. It's got to be something that's not at least preternatural. It's not something that normally happens. I think that we have sufficient categories to be able to explain this without adding something new on the board, like UFOs and little green men and them trying to do stuff. But like I said, I think Alberino's onto something there. With everything that we know about Jubilees, Enoch, the way that Second Temple Judaism looked at the incursion of the angels into Earth, like, yeah, I think that he's got valid points.
I really enjoyed the last 15-20 minutes when we went off the outline and just talking about like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I really enjoyed, so I thank both of you. Okay, so continuing with this so-called documentary, the next evening, while Lisa, again, the veterinarian lady, was in the kitchen, that missing boy, Cody, well, they saw his ghost running through it. Suddenly, blood started running through her nose. She admitted that she had a couple of those since she came to the farm. When the security crew rewinded the cameras, they saw Cody's ghost running through the kitchen every night at 11:11 p.m. They didn't want to tell Hoyt, right, Cody's father, the ranch owner, that this was his son whom they saw on the camera. So they just said we saw an energy, quote unquote. So they all waited in the kitchen until Cody, the boy, showed up again and started running out. And now that Hoyt happened to be there in the kitchen, he saw the ghost as well and started running after Cody's ghost outside the ranch. I mean, still on the ranch, but outside the house. Cody's ghost entered a shed, and upon them breaking the door, so the whole team needed a while to break the door, they didn't see anyone inside. Now here comes the freaky part, as if this was not freaky enough. Lisa found a huge canine prints on the ground, while the crew found an empty metal box that said emergency only and letters MDE on a side. After making a phone call, the team found that the MDE were already on the land between 1967 till 1971. Hoyt was very suspicious, and this is when the team found a tape in the same shed, and we'll soon discuss the material on the tape. So I don't know if you guys have anything to say or if you want me to continue talking about the material, but in your research, because like some of you said, I think it was bad, that weird stuff has been happening in Utah in this section for centuries. Do you guys know what was happening in the late 60s and early 70s when it comes to this so-called scientific team that was there to investigate the land and the paranormal? Do you guys have any accurate information? Because I cannot rely fully when it comes to this document.
So in the early 70s, late 60s is when the UFO, stuff started very first to be kind of publicized with the whole basin, the Uinta Basin area, like as a whole area. That's all I really know about that. I will say that there is like, the ranch is huge, and it's got several different places, homes, abandoned homes and stuff where families have lived. And one of the abandoned, houses does get a lot of paranormal activity. The typical cold spots, EMF readings go haywire, people seeing ghosts and that kind of thing. I was watching one crew that went out there, and they were using like a FLIR, like the heat, vision gun thing that I would love one, but they're like $3,000 for good ones. And it didn't pick up a heat signature that walked by. It picked up just a black spot. It wasn't cold. It wasn't hot. It was like in the shape of like a bipedal human type thing, but it was just black. And so you could see it, against the backdrop of everything else that had certain heat signatures. And so it was just really interesting, as they saw that, kind of thing pop up at one of these, abandoned ranch house sites. So the idea, that the 8-year-old boy, spirit is out there and is running around, again, leads to, that this other stuff, is happening. Did it happen like that? Probably not. But is it going on somewhere on the ranch? Yes.
Yeah. So some things that kind of parallel what happened. That sounds like a fictional account of something that didn't happen, but it's based on things that did happen. So as far as like poltergeist activity, one of the things that Gwen reported, Gwen Sherman, was that she came home one day with groceries and put all of her groceries away, walked out of the room for like 5 minutes, threw the bags away, walked out of the room, came back. All of the groceries were out of the cabinets and in the bags and back on the table. One of the things that Terry Sherman had reported was that he had a tool that was used for fence post digging, and it had gone missing. And he asked his kids, he's like, "Hey, what did you do with it? Come on, guys." They couldn't find it. The next year, so this was like in the spring of next year, they found it. It was 30 feet in the air, twisted in tree branches. This is a 70-pound tool, and it was suspended 30 feet in the air, twisted in the tree branches. It was not something that a kid, I mean, I couldn't do that. I'm a big guy. I couldn't do that, to carry like a jaguar, carry the 70-pound instrument up into a tree. Not going to happen. So as far as like the paranormal activity, poltergeist kind of thing, that has been reported on the homestead. Like Ben said, this is 512 acres. Right, this is an absolutely huge area. The interacting with creatures and causing blood or some other negative side effects. One night Terry Sherman had the dogs were barking. There had always been orbs kind of going around the property. He would like see them, not like in a camera, like see the orbs. And this was a blue orb. The dogs were barking at it. And so he thought, well, heck, I'm just going to, whatever this is, I'm going to scare it away. I'm going to let the dogs out. So he lets the dogs go and chase after it. He can't call the dogs back. He hears the dogs whimpering and whining. He's sitting out there calling. They won't come. So the next day he goes out and looks for them. And he said that there was a spot, it looked like butter, where these animals were just melted. And so this was something that's not only reported by Gwen and Terry, but was also reported by Colm. Kelleher has also been reported by Travis Taylor, seeing these orbs. Something is happening here. They believe that one of the orbs interacted with a cow and it killed the cow. And Travis Taylor went out there with his Geiger counter to test the background radiation, and he said that the radiation for the background of the atmosphere was the equivalent of standing 2 inches from a microwave with it on. Like that, you could stand in this area and essentially get cooked. And so there is definitely something going on there. As far as the MDE, like Ben said, in the 60s and 70s, the whole Uinta Basin was being studied for the the aerial phenomena, and we honestly don't know a lot about what was going on there with Project Blue Book and all that. What we do know is that in 2002, which was before this documentary was made, before this was made, the NIDS team was hired to go out there, which is what the National Institute for Discovery Science, and that was funded by Bigelow. He paid $22 million into this, had the very best of all the technology that could possibly be out there, and they spent 2 years studying all of this, and most of what they got back was, none of our equipment is working. We've all experienced stuff. We've all seen stuff that shouldn't happen. These were all scientists that were contracted to come out. So these were people who are by nature skeptics that were just trying to figure out, well, what is the natural phenomenon that's happening here? And although they didn't produce any evidence that would convince somebody who was skeptical that wasn't there, all these scientists walked away from the ranch being believers that there was something happening there. So that kind of speaks volumes for the validity of the phenomenon that's happening on the ranch.
And just as a side note, I wanted to throw in there, you know how much Bigelow paid when he bought the ranch back in '96? Only $200,000. I'm like, I can't buy half a house for $200,000 today. 500 plus acres. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's weird. That was way below the price. You have to ask yourself, was it because of some shady business or because someone couldn't wait to just flee the scene because they were tired of the paranormal activities and just scared of their life? So it's like, what is it? Okay, so a couple of evenings later, after they found this box that said, MDE from 60s and 70s, two strange bright flying orbs showed up on the ranch. The next night, Cody's spirit was standing by Lisa's bed. The strange bright light flashed from the outside on the same evening. One of the crew members reached out to the front door to move the curtain only to see a huge, fast creature running by. Camera showed a shadowy, dark creature with creepy eyes, something like wolf-like or hyena-like creature. It was 2 a.m. and the team went out after the creature. Lisa believed that it was the same animal as the one that left the huge prints in the shed, and she estimated that the weight was easily 500 pounds. Then they spotted in their own vicinity, they spotted the animal and started chasing it in their truck, but some of them went on foot. The creature looked ugly, bloated, and honestly, based on their documentary, looked a little bit fake because, they had limited budget in this so-called documentary, so it didn't look super real, but that's, according to the budget they had. The animal disappeared, and they found a hole in the ground which led to an underground entrance. This is where it gets even crazier. If you thought this is crazy, it's get even crazier. The whole crew went in this underground entrance where they found a human skeleton. They believe that the old painting found on the wall of the cave was a spacecraft. While some of the guys were walking outside with Hoyt, the ranch owner, back then, there was again this bright light coming from a stable. They found nothing inside except that creepy, eerie music that started playing by itself. And I'll stop here. Okay, what I'm interested here is first, one of you guys mentioned that this reminds you of the some other cryptid stories where the creature would be like having red glowing eyes. So I want to just, if you guys want to make a parallel with that, and at least in documentary look like wolf or hyena, something like that. And the second thing is like, have you ever Google or read in an article or a book or watching a video that there was actually something found underground? Anything, caves, buildings, anything that was suspicious underground, because, and I cannot judge if this is true or not based to some online, comments and even one short video. Supposedly, when they were like scanning the whole area, there was something underground found, and I don't know how much of that is true because again, you can't, of course, believe every source found online. So these couple of things, Ben.
So yeah, I mean the hatch is real. I think they've found a couple of openings to storm cellar, bug out bunker, underground kind of things. But yeah, I know that the hatch is absolutely real. I know that they've done some, I don't know if it's sonar or LiDAR or whatever the correct term is, but yeah, they've looked and there's absolutely stuff down there. They've tried digging to it. They can't get there because they end up digging into like metal, and when they analyze the metal, it ends up being the same kind of metal that like our stealth fighters are made out of. um but it's all underground. It's there, they're like, digging with like what you would dig, like a water well with, right? And it's going in there and starts shaking, and they pull it up and they're like, well, what is that? And they send it off and do a spectral analysis on it, and it's, this crazy metal. And they're like, okay, that's not supposed to be there. you know um and then, yeah, so there's there to answer the question, yes, absolutely. I know there's at least one hatch. I think I've heard mention of two different hatches that go, down to, little areas. And that, yes, they have absolutely used, sonar, lidar, or whatever to know that there is something down there, but they don't know what it is.
Okay, I just have a question before Sean continues. Um, do you think that these underground bunkers and stuff, especially where they found this like army stealth military material that is found in spacecrafts, this is, I would guess 99%, I would guess that this is all human made. But we don't know if this was what was happening in the 60s and 70s with the previous research group. I'm just trying to connect the dots. Do you think that that's what was happening? It's all human made, and it probably came in the middle of the last century.
Um, if you believe in aliens, then it connects the dots pretty easily. If you don't, then I think you have to jump through a couple of more hoops to get there. Um, I will say this: the whole area is full of underground caves and passages. I mean, it's just chock full of them, and people don't even know where all they go. So the idea that some of them go under the ranch, yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, it's a part of the greater Uinta Basin area. There's guaranteed to be stuff under there. In fact, one of the UFOs that somebody saw supposedly like disappeared into one of the mesas, but in such a spot that it's not like you can just climb up the side of the mesa and poke it, and see what happens. But like they visually saw it just go into it and disappear. So yeah, there's absolutely, now, is it human made versus some other kind of being made? I don't know. That's, again, that's part of the mystery of the whole deal.
Yeah. So the the premise for the show that they're filming in a neighboring ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, is that underneath this ranch is just cave systems, and they're all filled with water. And so the idea was that there was gold that was stored in this place, and so then they're trying to get to the gold, and they're trying to figure out all these different paths of how they could possibly get into it. Because I mean, this isn't like digging through dirt; this is digging through rock, and so it's really hard to get to these places. And so if you look at that ranch, and it's like these cave systems go all throughout it. The same would be true of Skinwalker Ranch, because it's not like you're going to have this one place just absolutely full of these underwater caves, and the next one have none of it. They've done ground penetrating radar. They've determined that there are artificial structures under the ground. Again, this is rock, so under the ground, artificial structures. They've done digging, and they've tried to dig down into it. And one of the things that came up was a metal material. And I think that's what Ben was referencing, was this metallic material that doesn't occur naturally. It's a composite metal, so that's not something that occurs in nature. So yeah, there's definitely something in the ground. There's definitely something under the ranch. They're in I think it's Whitaker was the groundskeeper for the area, and every time he goes to dig in the ground, he ends up having some sort of contusion uh, in his head, and so he had medically documented this. It was this basically bleeding on the brain, this blood that formed between his skull and his skin. And so they're like, if you wouldn't have come in, yeah, you absolutely would have died. And then on the show, you can actually see it forming. Again, this is the second time that this has happened to him, and he attributes it to digging on the ranch. That was part of what Myers said when they sold it to the Shermans was do not dig on the property. I saw one episode where they go to open up the cistern, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can't do that because the Geiger counter goes crazy in this area." They opened it up. Dude got radiation burns on his hands from opening this. So there's radiation that's occurring under the ground. As far as the giant wolf, the red eye thing, there's multiple accounts of this that I know. One, Ben had already shared the wolf that was basically impervious to getting shot, and he was shot with a 30-06. This is something that can take down a bull elk, and this dog just unfazed. The second one that I know of was I think this was while Bigelow owned the ranch, while the NIDS team was out there from 2002 to 2004, and they saw something in the tree line, and there it had red eyes, and Colm was there, and again he's a biologist, and he was judging based on the spacing between the eyes. This thing's head had to be 3 feet wide. So he's estimating it's at least a 400-pound creature. They shot it, and it sounded like it fell. They go over to investigate, and they cannot find it. What they find is a print. And so they cast this print, and Colm sends it off because he's like, well, I'm not sure, but I'm going to send it off to university there in Utah. And they say the only thing that they can find that looks like this, it was a 3-toed print. The only thing they can find that looks like this was a velociraptor. And so, yeah, it gets just absolutely crazy, right? Like you're like that. What are you doing? Like this is insane.
Well, but the question is, did it have tasty testicles or not? That's the question. Did you need to salt them to
Tastes like
because
chicken.
that's a delicacy
Yeah,
for the Navajo?
let's eat them and find
Do
out.
you need to salt it or not?
Tastes like chicken.
I'm just asking to help Ben, so in case he finds out. Wow, so that's the only comparison they could have made, like with a dinosaur, with extinct species of animal. That's it.
They said there was no other animal that had these, because when you're looking at a cast, you're looking at distinguishing features, and so the distinguishing features of the print, it's not just the shape, it's where the pressure is, what are the areas, what's the displacement, and so when they're looking at the print, the only thing that they have that matches this is what they believe belonged to a velociraptor, and they only have one of these on the property, but Sherman has said that he saw a print that was left by the giant wolf that Ben was talking about. He was out there with his German Shepherd, and he said the print was 3 times larger than the German Shepherd paw. The only thing that would be big enough to leave a print that big doesn't exist anymore. That's a dire wolf. They don't exist. So, and in fact, Gwen said that she had seen something that was so large it had to stoop down to look into her car, and she was terrified of it. And so she's like, man, this is something like the size of a Great Dane. So Colm had done some research and said, honestly, the direwolf even wasn't that big. This is something that's bigger than the largest extinct canid that has ever lived on the planet. So, all natural explanations are kind of thrown out at that point.
Okay, I have one question specifically for you, Sean, but both of you can say. Okay, I'm still intrigued by this underground construction. If it's metal, like Ben said, this is not natural. Okay, of course, that's logical. Okay, so what it would be the source of it? We will say, well, it's either human or it's extraterrestrial. Okay, if it's human, probably someone who worked for a private contractor or the government would be built it. So there will be 2 sources: private contractor, government based. Okay, probably for some type of research or whatever. But let's say it's extraterrestrial. It's more fun, more interesting. For us, for most of us as Christians, we don't believe necessarily in, when we say aliens, we don't believe in some physical entities coming from different stars and planets. We believe in the fallen ones who choose to maybe shapeshift themselves or portray themselves as entities of flesh and then disappear, something like Skinwalker or shapeshifter or whatever. So this is where my mind is trying to make sense, and it cannot. And maybe you two can help me. In the sense, if it's not human made but extraterrestrial, if it's real physical entities like aliens, it would make sense for them to drill, to do something for the sake of them dwelling them for a short time. If they would send their own scientists, scouts, whatever, to dig, to research, whatever. But if it's a spiritual entity, they don't need metal, they don't need construction, they don't need rooms, they don't need beds, they don't need anything built. They're spirits, they can just go there. They don't need anything to rely on to take a nap or to drill or to explore. So this is where my mind is trying to understand, but it cannot. I would like to be human made, so I'm like, okay, there's nothing mystical about it. But I'm saying, let's say it is mystical, it is supernatural or paranormal. It doesn't make sense either if it's aliens or because we see, especially a lot of us from Christian perspective, that they're spirit beings. It doesn't make sense from that perspective that the spirit beings don't need constructions. But even it would make sense if the aliens would be some physical beings, then they will have advanced technology, go down and drill. For what purposes? I can only imagine, like exploring, trying to understand us, maybe that vicinity or whatever. It would intrigue their minds. So this is why I don't understand if it's extraterrestrial, if these are merely spiritual beings or beings that can choose to portray themselves as spirits, but also as in bodily form, like the angels, both the angels and the fallen angels. But I still don't understand. Like, would it be like their dwelling place, their research facility? It's like so many questions that then they don't make sense to at least me. So maybe you two have a better understanding, better grasp than me. So primarily, like I said, it's a question for you, Sean. But I don't know, Ben, if you want to go first, if you have anything to say.
No, I don't want to go first. I'm actually just Googling it right now to see, like, they've done some exploring in the caves, around there. And I was just trying to see, if they had anything more on what the metal was that they found. University of Utah analyzed the metal, said it's similar to the materials NASA uses to protect the space shuttle. But that was it. Nothing specifically on like the caverns or their construction that I can find.
Okay, so if it's alien, it's a spaceship. So that one's easy. If it's spiritual, it's like in Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann that live in the hills, the fairies. So they just live in the ground. If it's human, I don't think it's the government because like they've been able to like blast into the side of mountains and stuff, and they've been able to use that for a long time. But going down in the earth without some sort of large area where they're trucking things in, I don't think that was possible before, the invention of those giant drill bits that like Elon Musk has with his boring company. So prior to that, I don't think it was really possible or feasible for us to be able to get these huge caverns in the ground large enough to be able to build an artificial structure, right? Like you could have mines, but that's basically just a shaft this way, a shaft that way. But to be able to build up something huge, I don't think it's possible. But what if it was pre-flood structure, right? So it could have been that this was some sort of large structure for a society that was existing before the Great Flood. And then after the flood, it was buried underneath all the sediment that calcified, turned to rock. And now it's just a structure that's under there waiting for us to discover it. So those are my ideas.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. The concept of it being like, antediluvian, because, every time, scientists and anthropologists and, archaeologists think they've found, the oldest skeleton to ever be seen in North America, a couple of years later, they find another one that beats it by several thousand years, right? So we know that Native Americans were not the first people here. There are skeletons that predate them by hundreds and thousands of years, depending on how you look at your carbon dating. And so the land that is here, depending on, your view of the flood and whether it was actually global, or a generalized area, it would make sense that there would have been beings, possibly, watchers, possibly whatever, with now lost technology that very easily could have built this stuff underground. It makes me think of like Easter Island, and the Amoy or whatever they're called, the giant, multi-ton carved, like idols that, man today couldn't make them. And so if you follow the history of them all the way back, there, was the mythology of the natives that have lived there was that there was a time before any of the humans went there, that there was pale skinned, red haired giant race that had technology that no longer exists that made these things. And that a flood came and buried them. And the silt and stuff is why they're half buried now. And some of them look like they've fallen off into the ocean and that kind of deal. I think that has pretty good explanatory power, that it could be something that was intentionally made. It's down there. It just predates the flood or any known culture or civilization, that we have access to.
Sean, your mom is asking, could it be possible to have an area under the mountain that hasn't been touched by time, something like a dimensional portal?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's possible. I don't know why you would have a portal that, I mean, so either you got a portal, how do you use it? How do you get down to it? If you're going to use it to send, so it's a portal, I'm going to send something from it, I got to get to it. And if it's a portal to receive, I got to get out, right? And so this is something that's kind of under the, I think it's possible, but I don't think that it is something that was intended to be buried underneath ground. So something like Ben was saying, antediluvian, could it have been like a transport portal? That's even a cooler idea. I love it. Right? Like they had stargates. That would be, I'm down with that. But I just don't think that it currently occupies the space that it was intended to, because obviously we can't get to it. And there's no known access point to get to it, right? Like I could see, if you were to blast, hundreds of thousands of tons of stuff, and then you create this giant 4-lane highway going underneath the ground. And so, I mean, people would be able to be like, oh yeah, there's this giant hole in the ground. Let's go see what it is. Oh, there's this, dome structure. That's pretty cool. But there's nothing like that anywhere. So we don't have an access point to it. We have no idea what's down there. And that's what's causing us the confusion, because it's like, how would you build something underneath the ground that there's no way to get down there? So yeah, I think, yeah, I really like that idea. It predates the flood.
Okay, thank you. So back to the story. A couple of nights later, the dog was awakened from his sleep and started barking at 1 a.m. Suddenly, the dog was lifted up by some invisible force. His neck was twisted and he died. One guy, Matt, at least in the documentary, went out on the field to check things, and then a strange light and loud sound started affecting the atmosphere, and the guy seemed to be sucked into something. Matt was later found in the morning with his left arm broken. He was scared and started yelling, telling people to leave. And they didn't leave yet, but at least we see him in the documentary that he drove himself out of fear. After that, they found the old tape that we mentioned recently, and were able to find the tape player, so they can see the content. The tape showed the previous crew from the 60s being dressed in protective suits, such as in cases of pandemics. They spotted a girl on the field, Rebecca, whose mother was missing. The girl seemed to either have obtained some supernatural powers or that she was protected by some evil force since all the crew members around her suddenly died in great pain. While she was screaming, her mouth turned into a demonic face. Then a tall, skinny monster appeared and killed the camera guy. That was the end of the tape. The current team members, after met the guy with the broken left arm, the current team members that are left on the ranch were concerned, of course, after watching the tape and wanted to abandon the ranch. As they were walking outside, this hyena or wolf like beast went after them. Bullets didn't do anything to the animal, so they ran into the car. The beast was so strong that it hit the car, so the cart was spinning. Lisa became hysterical and hit a guy sitting by her like a maniac. Later, she said that she doesn't remember a thing, even when she was becoming hysterical and aggressive. One of the members, Sam, his theory was that this was all one thing or one intelligence, quote unquote, behind the mysteries. So orbs, wolf, the Cody's ghost running through the ranch. They could be all one part. Everyone else except Sam wanted to leave the place, but he was stubborn because he wanted to stay and research the thing because of this intelligence. And I think we can stop here for a second. If you guys have any comment of could this be all? Yes, we can all say it's all related. But could it be all what they call in the documentary, quote unquote, one intelligence that somehow we saw this in so many sci-fi and horror movies. There'll be an invasion or a parasite that will invade humankind, and there'll be a mastermind, a big brain, their boss, call it whatever you want, that will give them telepathic instructions, how to behave, when to invade, how much to attack, where to go. It will tell them the strategy. It will guide their own alien species or a parasite or zombies, whatever it is, depending on different movies and TV shows. So could we see maybe something like that big intelligence that is being guided by one mastermind, one big, sinister mind behind this, who of course we don't know who is, except it's easy for us to say, well, it's Satan, it's Lucifer, it's the devil. But can we see something like this, all these paranormal experiences as one intelligentsia just being manifested through different forms, like orbs, wolf-like huge creature, and things of that sort?
So I believe that there is a singular intelligence that is directing all of those different players. I do not believe that they are all just different manifestations of the same being. I think they're different beings, but I absolutely believe that there is, if you want to call him a puppet master, in the background that's causing, these things to happen and coordinating, whether it's the attacks or the, electronics turning off. The skeptic in me calls it the argument from absence, right? Because, we keep looking, to the NIDS team and stuff to give us the proof. Where's the proof? And they're like, we can't give you any proof because every time we try to take a measurement or we try to do something, all of our stuff powers down. And you can watch it happen in real time, even unaffiliated private contractors that are brought out to the ranch specifically to conduct a scientific experiment, will have everything, powered independently by all their own stuff. And, they'll be trying to launch a rocket in the air or something, and they'll say 1, 2, 3, launch. And right as they go to shoot the rocket up into the air with all the, telemetry stuff on it, all of the power just shuts down when it was just working, And so the skeptic in me says, oh yeah, likely story. You're faking it for TV. But the thing is that's what's been happening out there for decades. As soon as they go to try and catch something on camera or, get a measurement of this or that, things shut down. They can, you see some of the Geiger counters and some of that kind of stuff. You do see, the guy that gets, the embolism or whatever in his head, he still has the x-rays and shows them, on different interviews and stuff. But yeah, I don't I don't think that it would be one entity, who's just appearing as a wolf and then an orb and then an alien and then a ghost and then a this and a this and a this, because that to me feels like I would be ascribing too much power to one of those entities. Because I mean, that's what we look at when we try to describe, the Trinity, right? That it's one God, but it's three, but it's the same essence, and so we try to work our way and kind of grapple with it as best we can. I don't think we're going to find anything like that outside of God. I think they would be individual different entities. Something that I love about Skinwalker Ranch is that it marries, Bigfoot with, demonic and skinwalkers with UFOs. There's not any other place that I can think of that takes aliens, cryptids, spiritual, and manifests all of it in one place. So yeah, I think that there is probably, one intelligent being that's pulling the strings of all these different other beings, but I don't think that they're all manifestations of that one greater being.
Yeah, according to Kelleher, the NIDS team referred to this as a pre-conscious intelligence. So this is something that knows what you're going to do before you do it. So it knows when you're trying to get a measurement. It knows when you're trying to take a picture. It knows when it's being recorded. There was on the Skinwalker Ranch television show, they brought out a dude from the university that was an astronomer and brought out all these telescopes, and they want to know what the stars look like going through this anomalous area that's about 3,000 to 5,000 feet above the ground level. So they want to look and see what's going on here. So he takes these 3 telescopes, everything from the most basic to like professional astronomer gear. And so he's out there, and this thing, it auto calibrates, so it'll look at the sky. It's got stars recorded in it and the data, and it can tell you exactly not only what part of the sky it's looking at, but where it is on planet Earth. That way it can orient itself to identify where the stars are. So they have it set up, and the dude says, it doesn't want me to look at the anomaly. He says, it doesn't want me to look at the anomaly. Then he says, it's deleting stars out of the computer, and you can watch the screen as stars disappear. So it's losing data. Something is hacking into this thing and deleting data off the hard drive of this computer, of this professional astrological equipment, in order to be able to look at, so they can see stuff through like the viewfinder. But then they're like, okay, so that's fine. We'll just look at it. We'll just use the camera. The camera disconnects. This is like a USB cord. It disconnects and will not connect. This is not Wi-Fi. It's not Bluetooth. It's not like it needs internet connection. It will not connect. They even had a guy come in with a drone. This is like a professional drone. This guy does mapping for like oil rigs, and he wants to map the area to be able to do like LiDAR, be able to get an entire layout of the area. The way that operates is it operates off of a GPS satellite. So you could have no internet connection, no nothing. That GPS satellite's always running. It cannot connect to the satellite in that area. It connected up at the house, but when you come out to the area, it will not connect. He's like, I can't fly anywhere. So then they go back to the house to reconnect. They reconnect, and this thing has a battery life on it of like 15 hours. He was out there for like an hour trying to get it to connect. Goes back to the main house, and the battery is down at like 20%. He had a full battery. Like it just drained like 12 hours of battery. How does that happen? So there's something that's conscious that's going on there that's orchestrating these things. Now, as far as like somebody getting taken from the ranch or something like that and reappearing with like a broken arm, I haven't heard anything like that. But what I have heard was much scarier, which is the NIDS team observed a portal opening up and a creature crawling through the portal and dropping to the ground. Now, this dude had a what do you call it? It was like a long exposure camera trying to take a picture of this thing. And after multiple pictures, all he got was a light dot. But in binoculars, the other researcher said he could see something crawling through the portal and dropping off onto the ground. So when you said the thing about like this tall, gangly monster attacking, that might be dead on. So there are parallel things that are happening at the ranch. I mean, it's almost like there's so much going on at the ranch. You could basically blindfold yourself and throw a dart, and you're going to hit evidence. It's like you can't miss there. You couldn't make something up that's too crazy for what's going on at the ranch.
Wow. So I'm so glad we did this episode because, like I said, I was coming from the skeptical position because I didn't find too much, and I didn't watch this TV show, which has like several seasons so far. So I'm glad you guys joined me so that you can tell me from the other perspective. Okay, we're almost done with this documentary. After this event, when one of the guys leaves and others wants to stay, Cody's ghost comes to his father, who is sitting outside the house, and the ghost is pointing to a certain way. Hoyt, his father, runs after Cody's ghost. The rest of the crew, except Sam, plans to escape, but their truck is completely wrecked by someone or something. They called for help, so they had to wait until the morning, right? Because they don't have any vehicles available to leave. One of their friends, Ray, grabs a gun and kills himself in the kitchen because of all the pressure. Suddenly, a very bright light and a very loud sound appeared outside. It seems that it was the same long creature that killed the previous crew from the 60s came now in their house. So now the same being the 500-pound, wolf-like creature, but that skinny, creepy-looking, entity from that, from the 60s when they saw from the tape. Now that creature is suddenly inside the house. They all start hiding inside their rooms, and as the light flashes, the creature suddenly disappears. One of the people runs to the jeep, but the flash appears there, and the creature also appears, and it takes the crew member with itself. They just disappear. Now we come to the end of the documentary. Cody's ghost is standing before the ranch the following night and the morning, and the boy, well, his ghost doesn't move. A huge spacecraft appears above him at 3 a.m., the witching hour. We know that. In the following morning, and a huge beam of light points to his ghost, and this is where the documentary ends. Any commentary when it comes to the end, and then we'll switch to this to the both of you guys mentioned Kelly Harris and Nupp's book. I want to read few sources from that book as well. But any comments when it comes to the ending of this documentary? And because we've been already hour and 50, maybe we can be brief this time.
Yeah, I would just like to say, yeah, that's your classic Blair Witch ending, right? Chaos, 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 chaos. Man standing in the corner, staring and scene, end cut. So that's a little bit of Hollywood. Obviously, yeah, the tall gangly thing, they're gearing you to, to think that this is an alien being, and that it's even potentially the same alien from the 60s, as in more modern times, that's going and taking people. But yeah, I think they, they Hollywooded it up a little bit.
As far as the light, in the television show, I can't remember if it was Dr. Taylor or Whitaker that captured it, but they went outside. The entire mesa area lit up, and they go outside to try to figure out where the light is coming from, and they can't find anything, and it looks like a door just closed, and like the light moves away like a door just shut on it. And now this is something that also, it's a phenomenon that happens in the Smoky Mountains, where for some reason the mountain will just light up with no source of light. And so this is, classic Portal, right? So when you're talking about the light and the beam of light and stuff, I'm thinking like, yeah, that's something that happens at the ranch, where you have like these light phenomenons. And then in other places, I'm not sure if this occurs at the ranch or not. I think it does, because I think I have heard them talking about metallic sounds, but specifically in the Pacific Northwest, before an encounter with like a Bigfoot, they'll say that they hear a sound like a metal door closing. And it's like the classic portal, right? So yeah, I think that lines up perfectly with what they intended to communicate in the documentary. Again, I'm gonna agree with Ben here. They Hollywooded it up because they wanted to do the Blair Witch kind of thing, which was super popular at the time. But no, I mean the as far as the phenomenon that they're trying to communicate happens there, yeah, they're spot on.
Cool, thank you. Okay, now we're switching briefly to this book, which I posted the link, the Amazon link to this book. It got amazing reviews. People love it. Came out like about 10 years ago, written by Kelleher, PhD, and George Knapp. The book is called Hunt for the Skinwalker. Science Confronts the Unexplained at a Remote Ranch in Utah. This is the preface. This book is an account of a remarkable series of unexplained events that took place on a ranch in northeastern Utah and the unprecedented scientific study that followed. For 8 years, a team of highly trained scientists and others came face to face with a terrifying reality that, on superficial examination, appeared to break the laws of science, but that, in fact, was consistent with modern day physics. At the ranch, scientists found a world where a great deal of activity was hidden from visible sight, but, as the researchers soon discovered, was detectable with state of the art instrumentation. Some of the names in the book have been changed out of concern for the emotional well being of the family that owned the ranch at the time and for the sake of others who were followed. Now we're skipping to chapter 24. In the summer of 2004, one other ranch related controversy surfaced, and it carried with it the darkest of implications. A brilliant but maverick physicist known to have extensive contacts in intelligence circles in the UFO community suggested on the internet that one or two of the NIDS, which is National Institute for Discovery Science, staffers had been found murdered on the ranch and that the slayings had been covered up. The implication was that an unknown force had gutted the unnamed researchers and that this might signal the beginning of an quote unquote all out war with the extraterrestrials. The physicist considered this to be a matter of national security, and he invoked a comparison to the alien invasion movie Independence Day. He further asserted that the only reason he had shared the sketch information with others was so that he could find out whether it was true. In subsequent missives, I'm not sure what is this word, he stated that the original source of his information was a member of the NIDS board. Needless to say, there is not a word of truth to this rumor. With the exception of nonspecific severe headaches, profuse nosebleeds, and minor contusions, no serious physical harm came to any NIDS staffer or to anyone else on the ranch, and it is ridiculous in the extreme to suggest that alleged crimes of this magnitude would or could be covered up. Okay, so I like that he's trying to be, well, both of these authors are trying to be honest. They're not saying that nothing ever happened, that would cause someone's injury, like Sean was mentioning, someone's concussion, and you could actually see the MRI scans or CAT scans, whatever. So that's an evidence. But he was actually talking here about the NIDS staffers that, the rumor that someone was killed, it's not true because there was no evidence of that. So I like how he's bringing balance to like, hey, let's be honest, if there's supernatural, cool. But let's not also exaggerate and add all these extra elements if we cannot prove or give any backup. That's chapter 24. I also want to read a couple of chapters. Do you want to guys comment on this, or you're cool because everything is like self-explanatory?
I just wanted to say that this is something that it really increases the credibility of Kelleher, because he's approaching this from a very scientific point of view, and he's like, we don't have, like, he's not trying to embellish what had happened there. He's just like, we need to approach this from a very scientific point of view. We don't have time to be doing all this rabbit trail chasing down all these stories. That didn't happen. not while he was there, not while he was talking to the NIDS team. So this isn't. I mean, if it was a marketing ploy, you think that he would take it and run with it, right? But that's not what he's trying to do. And something else that I wanted to say about the changing of the names of the researchers and the people in the story is that these researchers they went on contract to go and work for this this program, and they would later have to go and have subsequent careers within their field. And so if they were exposed as somebody who was doing research on this, they might not be taken seriously in the academic community. So there is a reason that you have to protect the identity of the researchers that were doing this, because they might end up getting blacklisted because they were involved with something that has been met with so much skepticism.
Yeah, it reminds me on the Christian academia where you see scholars who would mock Heiser, but thankfully more and more scholars are coming with the same ideas and say, hey, yeah, this is not anything new. It shouldn't be weird. You just are not familiar maybe with the ancient Near East scholarship. That's it. But it's like some of the people in Christian academia, they will talk about gazillion topics, but when it comes to ghosts, giants, cryptids from biblical perspective, they will not go there. They're like, they will be probably too concerned. So I understand that. Okay, switching to chapter 25. Some of the events seemed to reek of poltergeist activity. Some appeared to be paranormal in nature. Some exhibited behavior reminiscent of UFO-like objects. And there was a smattering of cryptozoology-like events thrown into the mix. Were UFOs flying over the Utah ranch, or was the ranch haunted? And according to local lore, sometime in the 1970s, after a series of unexplained happenings on the property, the ranch was even visited by a strange individual wearing a black suit and driving a brand new black Cadillac with tinted windows, an event that is reminiscent of the so-called Men in Black episodes. Brand new Cadillacs were a rarity in the Uinta, I don't know how to pronounce this, Uinta Basin in the 1970s and remains so today. Okay, and I have chapter 27 and the epilogue. Did you guys hear about any of these so-called Men in Black stories related to the Skinwalker Ranch? Ben?
I've heard a lot of Men in Black stories. Most of them relate more to Mothman in the East Coast. I hadn't heard of any Men in Black dealing with Skinwalker, but the whole time we've been talking, I kept thinking, why hasn't there been? like why not? This is exactly the kind of thing where they would show up. So I 100% believe that, MIB showed up out there. I don't necessarily think that they're like a secret government agency as much as probably part of the problem. But yeah, I think that is probably spot on to have them showing up out there.
Yeah, I don't recall any specific instance of in my research of finding anything about the Men in Black, but again, there was a MIB shaped hole in my heart as I was reading the recounts of this, because I'm like, yeah, dude, this is totally like something the Men in Black should be investigating. But again, I agree with Ben. I don't think Men in Black is a secret government agency. If you read the accounts of people interacting with the Men in Black, they tend to be stranger than the phenomenon they're investigating.
Okay, thanks. Now we're switching to chapter 27, which is lengthy, so maybe I'll skip a couple of times so we can comment before I end. We have no real evidence to suggest that Indian witches have the ability to pull off the kind of wild exhibitions and phantasmagorical events that were seen on the ranch by many witnesses. Native American beliefs in other worlds and portals to other realities have demonstrable equivalence in modern science, and in that sense, we wondered if their legends about skinwalkers might also have a scientific step brother, something that might help us to understand what unfolded. It may not have been a true skinwalker that was haunting the Gorman Ranch, but something certainly manifested itself again and again, over a period of several years. Something gave rise to the bewildering plethora of anomalies. Something manifested itself as a black cloud in the trees, from which a telepathic voice reached out to the NIDS scientists. Something appeared as an opaque predator creature that roared loud enough to make a grown man cry. This is all new info. I love this. We didn't see this in the documentary. Something moved through water but could not be seen. Something generated voices from the sky. Something floated in the sky as glowing orbs, stealth-like craft, disc-shaped UFOs, and even a flying recreational vehicle. We saw them. Either a single intelligent was responsible for conjuring up this amazing variety of ephemeral events, changing its appearance and form as well as its tactics and strategies, or a quote unquote family of anomalies was sharing the rent in some kind of paranormal fraternity house. Okay, so first I'm a little bit, I won't say disappointed, but confused. They the authors don't see that shamans would be able to pull out something like this. Yeah, probably not everything, but with the Skinwalker, we heard so many different stories and testimonies of this sort. So maybe I would here disagree with that. But also all these, stories that I didn't, because I didn't watch the TV show that has several seasons. I only watched this and a couple of other videos. I didn't know about this predator creature like coming, and making this roaring loud sound. I didn't know about this black cloud in the trees from which a telepathic voice came down. I didn't know about the something moved through the water but could not be seen, or something generated voices from the sky, disc-shaped UFOs. This is all new to me. Any comment on this, Ben?
So as we're going through this, for some reason, it keeps just reminding me of this guy that I've heard on a couple of podcasts, and he's an old farmer guy. I think he's in like Ohio or somewhere. But he recounts stories of, when he got retirement age, he went out and he bought a cabin, that's out in the woods, and he's way far up north, like close to Canada somewhere. And that once he started living in the cabin, he and his wife, he started exploring, and he found a burial mound, like a serpent-shaped burial mound, and that he would see lots of things like orbs and lights and portals and Bigfoot, and it was like a doorway was open, that the burial mound was like an energy source similar to like a Stargate, but that it would open up and that these things would come through. And that, the more you talk about, the footprint of the Velociraptor, and you hear about, this thing that can roar and make a grown man cry, it makes me think exactly of him recounting how one of the things that was sent through the portal to come after him was a thing called a boar croc. And that the boar croc is like basically a prehistoric crocodile. They don't exist anymore. And it's got, a Latin name, but the Latin name translates to boar croc. And it's this huge, massive crocodilian, animal, that can smash trees and just, destroy cars and whatever it wants to, and weighs, probably close to a ton. So everything that I keep hearing, and I've never drawn this parallel before, but reminds me of the exact same stories that he recounts. And the thing is like he's just like an old retired farmer guy. He's not looking for fame or fortune. He has no reason to lie about any of this, because his friends and family, will think he's nuts if he does. So he seems a pretty credible witness, but it's on the complete other side of the country. And he's experienced a lot of these exact same phenomena, where he lives. And so it just seems interesting to me that you can find, something similar somewhere else, just not at the same magnitude of what Skinwalker Ranch is. So yeah, I think that's kind of, the one parallel I wanted to bring out right now.
Hey Ben, was his name Lee, the guy, the old farmer guy? Okay,
Yeah, I think that was Lee. Yeah, yeah.
okay, Nico, that is the guy that I said that we need to go and investigate. He lives right off of Bray Road. He had bought the property for hay farming, and there's a cabin on the property, and so he's had to stay there a couple times. And he's like, when I stay there, it's crazy. And all of his neighbors are like, that's where the Beast lives. The book, The Beast of Bray Road, was written about his property.
Okay, what state is this? Where does he live? So how can we find him? Like through internet sources, or does he live in the same state like you?
He lives just across the Illinois border into Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
So not that far from you. But yeah, about the phenomenon that they were just talking about there, the thing that roared really loud, that was the thing that left the Velociraptor footprint. The thing that was speaking telepathically to them, the account of it was terrifying, because the guy is looking, and then all of a sudden, like, he changes and he starts speaking on behalf of this thing, and he's looking through this, like through these binoculars, and he's talking to the other NIDS team, and he's saying, I'm watching you, I can see you. And it's like, what's happening? But it's like he was controlled in that moment by the thing that he was looking at, which is just absolutely terrifying. But yes, things that happen there in Skinwalker Ranch, they happen to lesser extent, but they also happen in other places. And I would agree with you, Nico, that I think that his Combs' loyalty to the scientific method is I don't necessarily want to say clouding his judgment, but he can't use the data from anthropological sources. He has to use scientific data in order for this to be taken seriously. And so I don't necessarily think he's saying, well, the shamans can't do that. But I think what he's saying is, we can't chalk it up to shamanism because we don't have a mechanism for shamanic magic. But there is a mechanism within physics to explain that. And so it's one of those things where, oh, just because you give a name to it makes it real. And it's a phenomenon that people who are in this space, the cryptid UFO thing, it's something that we kind of get upset about, because it's like, okay, so the thing that we've been talking about for years, you've identified the phenomenon, but now you want to claim it as scientific and take all of the mystery away from it because you give it a name. Are you dumb?
That's a good point. I just want to say something. I didn't want to interrupt Ben. And by the way, I don't believe in this theory even 1%. But another what if scenario went through my head as I was listening to Ben. So if there are these different stories coming from different sources about this prehistorical, dinosaur-like creatures that are extinct, I'm thinking, I don't believe in this, but I'm thinking, what if there is a chance that this place is so much paranormal, so much weird, that it can even bend the time, so that something that existed before in our reality can, at least for a second or a minute or 5 minutes, it can somehow bend and blend together, merge, and then disappear. The same way that the spiritual creature can choose to manifest in flesh and then disappear. It can be in the shape of a dogman, skinwalker, flying orbs, absolute or predator-like creature, like, right, like to be invisible but then manifest at will. So I'm thinking, what if this place is some and I know we're going too fringe even for the podcast, but that's fine. I'm just thinking, what if this place is so weird, like I said, another Bermuda Triangle place where if it can even bend time. So like now you go back according to the history, if it's secular history, millions of times. According to the Christian young earth creationists, maybe 10,000 years in time. That doesn't even matter. But let's say these two realities become one for a short period and then it disappear. Like something would make these two realities as two strings somehow merging for a second. And I don't believe, like I said, in this for a minute, but I'm just thinking that would be a fascinating idea. So I don't know if Sean, if you want to say something on this, or even Ben. I don't know.
I can go first if you want, Ben. So in my understanding, theory of relativity, time space, physicists will say that the time space theory is a useful fiction, that it makes the math work really well, but it's not actually how we experience time. So most scientists tend to be presentists that believe that that time is something that's kind of objective. However, in my understanding of the theory of relativity, if you bend space, you necessarily bend time. And so if you are creating this overlap, this bend in space, then you would have to bend time. Again, I guess the theory is just a useful fiction. It's not something that necessarily follows, and it is only employed because the math works out really well. But being as I'm not a physicist and I don't understand those arguments, I would think that it would be logical to think if time and space are married and you're bending time or bending space, you are therefore also bending time, because you're not going to get two spaces that occupy the same time to overlap. So if you've got two spaces occupying the same space, they can't be from the same time. My thoughts.
So yeah, I'm actually reading through William Lane Craig's book, Time and Eternity, right now. But the more study that I do on what time actually is, unfortunately, the more I'm believing time travel is just not even possible. I don't think that it's a thing. My mind might change, in the future as I, collect more evidence. But right now it's looking more like time as we experience it is more a product of our mind and our memory. But in actuality, the only time that exists is what we experience is right now. And so once you have passed, me saying this, what I just said no longer exists in some kind of line that you can go back to and revisit. And just like I don't believe that the future is already written for us, therefore it's not like you could travel forward to it either, that the only actual time. Now, time as a dimension of like space time is something a little bit different, I think. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Because for the longest time, I held to the belief that time was literally just a man-made invention, to celebrate birthdays, basically. Excuse me. But that it didn't actually exist. But then the more study, that you do Einstein's theory of relativity, and the more you look at space and time and what it is, it seems to be like a different dimension of our reality that we use to measure things. And so you can't argue that it does actually exist. I just don't think that it's something that you can necessarily journey to or from. It is interesting that perhaps time can slow, like if you were to travel at the speed of light, right? You would, as you experience it, you would continue to age, normally. But then as you were to travel back where you came from, everybody would be much older, to kind of sum up, that theory of relativity there. But it's not like you're actually going forward or backwards in time. It's just that time around you, because you're in motion, it compresses and slows. So as far as could these dinosaurs, be like coming from back in time, and I actually looked it up. I got it wrong. It wasn't Lee from the Beast of Bray Road that I was thinking of. It's a guy named Roger who lives in Minnesota with the boar crocs. But, just as much as I want it to be real, as much as I want to believe, I think the only way we could physically get dinosaurs back is to Jurassic Park them, which, you know, I think we're pretty close to.
Okay, I
Um,
got another even wilder theory. We don't have to talk about it, but I was just thinking, what if those spiritual entities, because they were here, if we check the Bible timeline, they were here before us. What if they used to use and collect different animal samples the same way, let's say, cow mutilation, or this dog was drained out of, from his blood? What if in their perverted research way they want to collect and store and research DNA and samples of us? What if they were able, in a way, to procreate those extinct, dinosaur species, so that when people would saw traces that look like dinosaurs, it could be something like that, but then it wouldn't be a regular animal dinosaur type, like it will be more, it will resemble like this entity's ability to cloak into invisibility mode and be partially spiritual, partially physical being. I don't believe for this even zero point 0.1. I'm just thinking, what if it will be a very interesting sci-fi concept movie, comic book, novel that I would like to read. But I'm just thinking out loud what crosses my mind. It will be, I'm not saying if there's any chance of this happening, but I'm thinking if they're storing samples and researching and taking all this blood from animals, maybe even from people, who is to say, because they were there before us, they didn't do that in the past? It's not impossible. Highly unlikely, but it's not impossible. So I don't know. I was just thinking about that. Okay, I'm almost done with this book. Was the Skinwalker, for lack of a better term, a malevolent force? In a sense, it was. It butchered and abducted livestock, attacked other animals, and seemed intent on generating strong emotional responses from the Gormans, as if it thrived on terror and confusion. And this is merely demonic. You can see this. Sean and I cover so many stories with demons like thriving on fear, and like that will be feeding off of this energy. But it also seemed to draw a distinction between harming animals and harming humans. Other than psychological damage, intense headaches, nosebleeds, and a few unexplained cuts, no humans were physically maimed, while animals certainly were. Whatever might have been slipping into our world seemed to know the difference between slicing up a newborn calf and doing the same to a human. It stuffed bulls into a trailer, but didn't do the same to people. Dogs were incinerated, but the Gormans were not. If we are to believe both the Navajo and academic researchers, skinwalkers are inherently evil and would not hesitate to kill a person. It suggests that whatever was present on the ranch was not a skinwalker in any traditional sense. Man, this is instead of giving us answers by the end of the book, the authors are getting even more wild and giving us more thoughts and more questions, and there are no answers. Okay, like I love this. Like they will know the difference between humans and animals. And I'm also reminded when in Job, when the devil came to present himself to to God, and God said, yeah, you can go, for the sake of testing Job's faith, you can go and harm Job if you want, but here's the line: don't take his life. As if it was almost something like with them, like skinwalkers. Yeah, they would go in, not skinwalkers, but whatever this malevolent force would go in and destroy animals, it would not do the same harm to people. Not because it cannot, not because it's feared, but because there's a limit how far in their wickedness it can go. That's what I'm picking up in reading between the lines. Ben.
Yeah, I like that, because you make a good point. When I see stories of poltergeist phenomenon, or you hear cryptid stories, it seems that they're very much intent on harming humans. That's kind of their whole shtick, their whole point. But here, outside of potential radiation poisoning, and fear-based stuff. Like Dr. Travis Taylor, I was reading a little thing, while he was there filming for the secret of, the History Channel secret of Skinwalker Ranch. He lived on a trailer on site on the ranch, and reportedly for the first time ever started having like night terrors, waking up, screaming his, lungs out, and, not really understanding why. And have, he's the astrophysicist, right? The super, math, kind of geared guy. And then, after having left that, not living out there on the ranch anymore, all of that went away. So there's definitely, I would say, psychological, emotional trauma. And that's, what the critics about it all, who are on the outside looking at it, that's what they say. It's groupthink, it's mass hysteria, it's, illusions, your brain's making it all up, that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I think there's just enough there to rule that out. But I wish there was more there that I could confidently say, yes, it is absolutely this. And all the research and everything that they do, everything is geared towards aliens, right? Like that's kind of the bent that it's on, which I think loses a lot, excuse me, of a lot of the other, paranormal, preternatural type stuff that takes place out there. It's like, let's take, a portion of what we see, and now let's try to interpret everything through the lens of, oh, it's aliens. It's oh, aliens are doing this. And I think there's just a lot more going on out there beyond that. It kind of reminds me of the old TV series Lost. Like it was, what is this? How is there a polar bear? What's the monster that's knocking down trees that we never get to see? Why are we finding temples? What's up with the bunker and the timer counting down? It's like it's got all of these different things at play in this one area.
Did you say the old TV show Lost? Dude, you made me feel so old suddenly. That was like
so
15
old.
years ago.
Hey, I'm older
That's
than
not
you,
old.
but Lost is old.
I'll
But yeah,
forgive you for
so
this one.
there you go. Yeah, so it just, it has so many awesome, unique aspects. There's so much that's going on there. I think there is definitely something actually happening. I just want to go out and experience it myself so that I can try and wrestle with it and figure out what it is. So if for some reason, the owners of Skinwalker Ranch happen to see this and want to invite me out because it's private property, I don't want to get shot, I would love to go walk around. And we'll bring Sean, and it'll be great. Fun had by all. And maybe we'll eat, velociraptor testicles. We'll see.
Yeah, so for me, I kind of come to the opposite conclusion of Kelleher. I think that it's substantiated that there's something that is happening there. There's lore that regarding what it is, and I would just, since we already brought him up, I would just invoke Alberino and say, well, of course the spirits can't kill people because we have dominion, right? As humans, we have dominion over the land. They can't kill us. They can scare us. They can harm us, physically, scratches. When you look at paranormal activity, poltergeist activity, you never see somebody killed. It's always somebody was hurt, somebody was scared, lights were moving on and off. Animals get killed quite often, but not people. Normally, if it's people that are getting killed, it's typically something demonic, and it's not a one-out attack. It is the body wears down after so much time fighting the demonic entity. So yeah, I think I would just come to the opposite conclusion of Kelleher. I think that there's enough to say there's a phenomenon that's happening. We have a category for it. The people who've lived on the land forever tell you what it is, but I'm not going to believe them. I'm going to invent some new physical phenomenon that's going to explain everything that they're saying, has all the same explanatory power, but it allows me to say these people are stupid. I think that that's so arrogant, right? So, yeah.
Okay, before I read the epilogue, and we'll be almost done with the episode, I just want to invite everyone to subscribe to Pastor Ben's YouTube channel, which I included in the video's description. I think it's called Pastor Ben's Thoughts. He needs more subscribers, and please subscribe to our channel because the last few months, I barely noticed any growth. Many people would unsubscribe as much as they would subscribe. So, if it doesn't hurt you and it won't subscribe, like, share videos, it will help the algorithm. Okay, that being said, let's dissect the epilogue. Suppose that against our will, we were plunged into a world where traversable wormholes were staring us, like aiming us in the face from only 100 feet away. Suppose that as happened to the Gorman family, we saw a completely different sky from another world on the other side of that wormhole. Suppose we came up against bizarre creatures and monstrous denizens of the underworld as they walked freely around our property. Dude, these guys stealing my ideas, even though I came up with these ideas 10, 15 years after the book authors. But we mentioned something very similar. How would we react if the concepts of extra dimensions and parallel universes were interfering with our daily lives in a frightening and completely unpredictable manner? What then? Suppose we were suddenly living in a reality where we were certain that some non-human intelligence was aware of our every word and moved and seemed to have a fascination with toying with us. What if these intelligences began introducing terrifying animals into our property from other dimensions? We also said this. And conversely, what if they stole our cattle and transported them into another dimension, never to be seen again? This may have actually happened to a ranching family in remote Utah and under the radar, possibly happened dozens of times around the United States to other ranching families. These families did not go in search of the bizarre, nightmarish realities they encountered. They're normal citizens who are concerned with paying the mortgage and spending time with their children. That's the ending, the epilogue of the book. But I'm so amazed how we came up with similar hypotheses. We don't claim that's to be true, and they don't claim to be true. They're saying, what if? And that's an end of this great book. Amazon link, once again, is provided. Any concluding thoughts to what I read and in general to the whole episode? So we'll be concluding in the next 5 minutes. Any concluding thoughts that you guys wanna add to the episode? Also, this question before we leave. We all know about this fascinating paranormal side effect called the hitchhiker's what is called the hitchhiker's effect, right? Okay, and that is when you go to a haunted or supernaturally infected area where the paranormal activities are just blossoming, and you go there and you're just poking the bear because you don't mind your own business. And many people are reporting that once they will go and they will go back home, something will start changing their lives drastically and never to be a blessing. They will start having nightmares. They will feel someone is watching them. They will see flying orbs. They will see these demonic attacks. They will have maybe sleep paralysis. Their house members would have this fear and terror. They will not be normal again after visiting certain places like Skinwalker Ranch. So please give your concluding thoughts, but also please include, do you think as people of God, the hitchhiker effect would affect us and follow us? Not because, yes, we have nothing to fear in the name of Christ, and in the name of Jesus, we have all the authority to rebuke and defend ourselves against these demonic attacks. But it's another thing because the Bible also says, do not test the Lord. So that's another thing. If you're going somewhere intentionally to investigate something, and when you go back, God, for whatever reason, may allow that something that came with you and is attached to you spiritually is now afflicting your family. So please give your concluding thoughts, but please also include hitchhiker effect. If you will go here, do you expect to be fully protected? Thank you.
So I would say that hitchhiker effect, or, you know, I sometimes refer to it as piggybacking, you know, because it's like they sit on your back and follow you, you know, back home. I think it's very, very real. I've heard too many stories, even from people that I know, of it happening. Um, and so, yes, I would say that it is absolutely a phenomenon that really does happen. Now, as Christians, can we say, would it happen to us? And are we protected and that kind of thing? So I'm a little bit double minded about that subject, because on one hand, if we're dealing with spiritual beings, right, that can obviously see us, but we can't see them, then how hard is that, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not, for them to see you and to watch you drive home and to follow you, whatever their mode of transportation may be, and interact with you, right? Or with your family or whatever. Um, they can see us, they can follow us, it's around us at all times. You know, it's like I think it was the prophet Elijah, you know, whatever, praying for, you know, the student from the, you know, prophet school to have his eyes opened up to the reality around him, and he sees, you know, the flaming chariots, and, you know, all of, you know, it doesn't matter that there's an army coming against us, those that are with us, you know, are greater than those that are surrounding us, kind of thing. There is a spiritual reality or realm that we do not see, that is very alive and active, and that can see us and that can interact with us at all times. And so when you keep that in mind, it's not very hard to imagine that that's how demons, you know things about us that they shouldn't know. It's because they've been watching you. They've been watching you the whole time. You know, that's how they can tell you what your sister, you know, whispered to you in secret when you were both 5. You know, it's like they were there. And so it's an easy thing, I think, for them to follow you home, to attack you, to demonize you, to hurt you, and things of that nature. Um, I usually will teach, you know, when I'm talking about spiritual warfare type stuff. As a pastor, I always warn people. I'm like, look, if God has called you to a place, to a people, and there is a spiritual influence on those people, He is 100% going to meet your need and protect you because He's called you to it. Okay? If you just saw it on TV and you think it's awesome, and so you want to go in there, you know, like gangbusters, and you know, shooting the devil with your in Jesus name rebuke and stuff. No, I think you're pulling a, you know, 7 sons of Sceva, and you're probably going to get your butt kicked and, you know, end up running away with your tail in between your legs. Not because the name of Jesus is less effective, but I think it is because of our heart's intent. And if we are followers of the way, are we following Jesus when we're doing this, or are we sidetracking and going off and away from where He's calling us to be and what He's calling us to do? And I think you can see that with the nation of Israel. I think you can see that all throughout the Bible. If you are following Jesus, if you're abiding in Him and He in you, and you're where you're supposed to be, you are protected. You are covered. You are, you know, you're good. But when you decide to step outside of that and kind of do your own thing, consequences, whether they be natural consequences or supernatural consequences, will arise. I think that's just the nature of the beast. And side note, a gathering of bats can be called a cauldron of bats. Okay, there you go. That's my closing thought.
All right. So I agree. I think that if you are going into this place with the intention of stepping outside of God's covenant that He's made with you and the parameters, I'm not going to speak with spirits, and you go there with your little EVP and you're like, hey, what's up, guys? How y'all doing? You're going to be in trouble because you're not under God's protection, right? But if so, say you go there and you're setting up cameras and you're just chilling, you're making hot dogs, and you catch stuff that's happening. I don't think that you're in that kind of trouble, because you're just doing an investigation. You're not violating any rules, anything like that. Now, could you still get a hitchhiker? Sure. I mean, like Ben said, that they could follow. I mean, you can't see them; they could see you. They could follow you. And so, what are you going to do? You're going to reject it. You're going to renounce it. You're going to rebuke it. You're going to revoke its rights. You're going to kick it out. It ain't going to want to be there. Your house is going to be the most unsettling place for that spirit. You're going to worship the Lord. You're going to proclaim the name of Christ over everything you own. And that thing, he's going to be gone because he don't want to be there, because everything you do every day reminds him that he's defeated. So that's how you deal with that. Now, I have a friend in my church. He was a missionary in South America for 10 years. And when they went down there to the tribe gave them this huge lot of land on the other side of the river. And the reason they gave them the land, they come to find out, was because there was an evil spirit on that side of the land that wasn't going to let them stay there. They didn't want the missionaries to be there. They wanted the thing to kick them out. Well, turns out that the river would flood on one side and not the other. It's not how rivers work, but the missionaries were protected. Turns out that there would be swarms of locusts that would come and eat up the crops of the people over there, and they would come and ask for the food from the missionaries. And the missionaries never ran out of food. They would just keep giving them food, because God protects his people, and these people converted to Christ because they saw all of these miraculous things that were happening. Their gods were defeated, and Christ was proclaimed. So, do I think that that these places are necessarily dangerous for Christians? Not if you're called there. Like Pastor Ben said, if you're called there, if God gives you the calling, he's going to give you the protection while you're there. However, could they be dangerous to somebody who's out thrill seeking? Yeah. And I think that's part of the thrill seeking, right? You're not going there because you're going to be safe, right? You don't go watch a horror movie because it's going to give you, nice, happy feelings. You're chasing something that's going to give you a rush. And so I think that there is an inherent danger there, and that's what attracts you to it. But I also think that as believers, we are more protected against those things if we are obeying the Lord. So I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with going there to record and take measurements and stuff like that, as long as leave your Ouija board in the pit of hell. Don't bring it with you. It don't belong with you. You don't need your EVP thing. You can set up mics on cameras. Don't be talking to it, right? And just hang out with the boys and worship the Lord. And if you're in a place that's truly cursed, they're not going to like it. And I guarantee that'll generate something. So maybe go there and have a psalm sing or something like that, and you'll get all the evidence you need. So that's my closing thoughts.
I think that some of the manifestation of these spirits could be, if people who will be eating hot dogs, they will be also using ketchup besides mustards. Maybe spirits don't have that taste. So who knows? Maybe their chef is upset and sending the swarms of these entities against you if you're eating hot dogs with ketchup. So I don't know. But if you're in Chicago, you may put ketchup, and then local demons would not attack you because they're like, yeah, it's fine, it's Chicago. So I don't know. Depends from local deity to local deity, right? So thank you everyone for being with us tonight. We chose a very light topic for the Valentine's Day, as you can tell, and I'm especially pleased that probably female audience will love this topic for the Valentine's Day. So you're welcome. That being said, in less than 40 to 48 hours, Carrie will join me as a co-host, where we will be hosting and welcoming two Christian archaeologists for the first time ever, Dr. Aaron Judkins and Judd Burton, who are very prolific, archaeologists, anthropologists, book authors. Will be assessing their latest book on Göbekli Tepe, which is supposedly the oldest found temple in the world. It's estimated by secular archaeologists to be between 10 and 11,000 years old. Dr. Aaron Judkins may disagree with it. Nonetheless, we'll be having a blast. We wrote the outline, we checked the material. We're expecting them, to join us this Sunday evening. It will be phenomenal. We'll be talking about the symbolism and iconography found on these pillars. We'll be talking about the potential reasons why is the further excavation of this very important location in Turkey stopped for the time being. Could there be any conspiracy behind that? Was there any Satan or serpent worship behind this? And we'll be talking about many different interesting topics when it comes to this. I'm especially excited because these are kind of big guns when it comes to guests. And, I got only a few or several of those so far. So for me, I'm especially pleased that after bugging one of them, Dr. Aaron Judkins, he finally accepted. So yeah, I'm thankful and I'm excited. I expect to see all of you in 48 hours. Next Friday, probably Sean and I, maybe someone else will join us talking about another very soft topic like tonight. Maybe not about bull's testicles and Valentine's Day, but it will be something of a similar fashion. And if someone told me maybe I should be a stand-up comedian and I would make more money than doing the podcast. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, please keep praying for us. God bless you. Go serve your King. I'll see you next time. Take care.